Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Here's your host, Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon.
Welcome into the basketball podcast of Mid-America. It is March 20th, and Arkansas is still playing basketball. Razorbacks went to Des Moines, Iowa last week and beat Illinois in their first round game, and then took down number 1 seed Kansas in a thriller. It was a crazy few days. I'm just happy to have you on the pod and Andrew on the pod too, to kind of help me break it all down. Arkansas beat Illinois 73-63 on Thursday and advanced to play Kansas on Saturday. Kansas beat Howard pretty good. I think that was to be expected, even though Howard gave Kansas a game for about 15 minutes. You know, Howard came out guns a-blazing, knocked down, I think, 5 threes, I think, in the first half, and hung around for a little bit. But Kansas, I think their talent, even though they don't go very deep, their talent took over. So that set up a really intriguing game against Arkansas in the second round. And Bob, you wrote about how Kansas, no other team as a 1 seed has lost more second round games than Kansas. And that was pretty much your preview. And that kind of came to fruition on Saturday, and Arkansas is moving on to the Sweet 16 in Las Vegas. They're going to play UConn on Thursday at 6:15 Central on CBS. And we're going to Vegas. It's pretty crazy. Like, I think we were, at least me and Bob and Curtis and John Neighbors, we were kind of talking while we were there. Like, it's a possibility. I think all Eric Musselman's teams have to do is get there, and there's a far greater than zero chance that they're going to visit the second weekend. It's pretty remarkable. Bob, do you have any just kind of lasting impressions from the week? I think I'm still trying to come down. Like, it was kind of a whirlwind.
Yeah, I'm still trying to warm up.
That's true. It is painfully cold in Iowa.
Yeah, I will say the folks there in Des Moines were super nice. Could have been nicer. I knew we weren't in Miami, but man, it was like snowing, and the wind was blowing the snow sideways, and it was below zero wind chill, I think, one night. But I think it's supposed to be a lot warmer in Vegas, thankfully. But yeah, I really wasn't trying to put the whammy on Kansas, but I do get fascinated by stats, and so I kind of got that night, Thursday night, after Arkansas beat Illinois, and back in the hotel room, I start, you can Google things and look up stuff, and Hog Stats helped me with a couple things that didn't add up, because the first round games, back in the late 70s, when there were 48 teams, I think it went from 42 to 48. A lot of the number 1 seeds would get first round buys. But anyway, since 85, when the tournament expanded and the number 1 seeds were all playing openers, you could look through and obviously teams like Kansas won 2 national championships, the number 1 seed, but they'd also lost 3 games in the second round, which I thought was really interesting. And I thought that just shows you that whether it's Arkansas or somebody else, they have a chance. And also 9 of the last 12 years they'd had the tournament, a number 1 seed had gone down in the second round. So that's 48 games. So 9 out of 48, but I mean, that's not the greatest odds, but it shows it's not, impossible. So I just thought that was interesting. And then of course, Kansas went down again, but, yeah, I guess I thought, I told people before going to Des Moines, I said, you know what, won't surprise me if Arkansas makes the Sweet 16, won't surprise me if they lose to Illinois. It's been a very up and down year. Everybody in the NCAA, Illinois is a good team. Illinois beat UCLA early and beat Texas on a neutral floor. 2 teams that are in the Sweet 16, UCLA and Texas, and both have, realistic shots to win the national title. So Illinois is a good team, but I thought it was a good matchup for Arkansas. I thought they were more athletic. I thought they were more athletic than Kansas. But I think what stands out to me is that this team, the stars all finally aligned for them. They've had pockets of really good play, like when they won at Kentucky, when they beat San Diego State. Obviously Florida and Georgia aren't great teams, but they really put it on them late at home. They beat A&M here, but they couldn't sustain it. And so I know 2 games is not a season, but that was 2 really well played games by Arkansas at the perfect time to be playing that well. So I felt like, they finally got it together. Whether or not they can sustain that in Las Vegas against really high level competition, I don't know. But that's what struck me was, the players have been saying we're good enough to beat anybody if we put it together, and they put it together.
I think to me at least, it's just kind of remarkable that they're back in this position because I think we maybe talked about it on the last podcast. If you go back to when Arkansas started conference play, I think they were 11-1, and they've been an under 500 team since the start of SEC play. But I think it's just another reminder to never count out an Eric Musselman team. Like I've done it. I don't know that I necessarily was completely out on this team could maybe make a run in the tournament, but I definitely had my doubts. There was probably more doubts in my mind than reasons for optimism. Um, but I'm not sure when I'm going to learn my lesson or other people are going to learn their lessons, but just something about this time of the year, man. I think Eric is just, and you can see former players that have played for Eric, they get on social media and they're like, his preps are built for this time of the year, and they leave no stone unturned as far as prep time. And going into the Illinois game, I felt really good about that one because they had 4+ days of rest, and then they beat Illinois by double figures. I think they got up by as many as 17. They made it interesting. Boy, did they make it interesting. I think that their lead got down to 5, and they were throwing passes off the side of the backboard in the backcourt, and it was getting hairy. Felt like, good Lord, here we go again. But they end up hanging on, and Eric's teams, or Eric improved to 52-10 as a college head coach in games when his team had 4+ days of rest ahead of it. And then you get past Illinois and you're like, man, number 1 seed with 1 day in between. What's going to happen? And they came out really prepared. And now Arkansas's got 4+ days of rest again before their Sweet 16 game against UConn. Devo had to be the MVP of the weekend, right? I mean, the kid just put the team on his back in the second round when Arkansas fell behind by a dozen, and I think he scored 10 straight points during one stretch in the second half. And I think ended up being 14 of 18, finished with 25 points, and 21 came in the second half. And check this out. So I looked up on Sports Reference. He joins, so this is not every player that's done this, but just a few of the names. He joins Sidney Moncrief, Todd Day, Corliss Williamson, among others, as Razorbacks to finish with at least 25 and 8 rebounds and a tournament win. And he's the first player since Corliss Williamson in 1995 against Memphis to do that on 60% shooting or better. I think it was, Bob, you've covered more tournament games obviously than I have, but I think it was one of the great tournament performances that we've seen, just in terms of, he really did put the team on his back. And it seemed like for a while he was the best offensive option that you had, because Nick Smith did not play well again against Kansas. I think he finished like 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 from the field. And, Ricky Council didn't have the best shooting day, but Devo, I think he finished 9 out of 15. And I mean, he played so well that, Jonathan Gavoni, who's I think he's a draft analyst for ESPN, he put out a tweet about Devo, just, showed a little bit of everything that he could do. I ended up writing both sidebars after games on Devo, and I felt really good about it. Like I think he stamped himself as an Arkansas legend, seriously, NCAA tournament legend. And I think Kamani Johnson told me after the game, he said, if anyone who thinks that Devo's, not a pro is, probably a fool in his mind.
Yeah, you go back to Devo's freshman year when he wasn't playing much early, and then he came on, and Jalen Williams came on, and obviously Moses Moody was there all year. But Devo hit that big shot against Oral Roberts that sent Arkansas to the Elite Eight. And you look at his production in the NCAA tournament, and he's always a good player, but he takes it to another level. And you're right, Nick Smith was struggling. Anthony Black, who's been such a good player, I would argue he's been their MVP. He goes 1 for 6, and Ricky hit a bunch of free throws, but he's struggling from the field. And you're going like, how if somebody told me before the game Nick Smith and Anthony Black will be a combined 1 for 10 from the field with 4 points, I would have said,
Yeah,
well,
against
that's
Kansas, you're probably thinking double-digit loss, right?
yeah, I'm thinking, how are they going to do that? But, Devo, 25 points, just like you said, he literally put the team on his back, plus 8 boards, and he was driving and just looked so confident. And then, Ricky got it going late when and then Devo fouls out, and you think, well, man, how are they going to do without Devo? And then Ricky took over and it really won the game from the free throw line. And Jordan Walsh just played so well in so many facets. And Kamani Johnson, 10 rebounds. But yeah, getting back to Devo, yeah, he's definitely whatever he does in Vegas or whatever he might do next season. I mean, yeah, he stamped himself as one of the great clutch players in Arkansas history. And I don't see him as an NBA first round pick, but I sure wouldn't. I'm with Kamani. I sure wouldn't bet against him playing in the NBA. I mean, he's a 6'4" guy that can do. He's a lockdown defender. That alone, his defense alone, could get him on an NBA roster.
Right, for sure.
And he's obviously improved his perimeter shoot. We know he goes to the hole. He rebounds for his size. I didn't obviously see it at the time, but seeing him, his CBS interview where he got so emotional, that was a cool thing. I mean, that was raw emotion, and that was just an Arkansas kid being overcome, with the moment. So yeah, Devo has such a good story on so many levels.
His ascension into that top guy for Arkansas was a bit unexpected. If you were to ask me before the tournament which Arkansas player might have a breakout moment in this tournament and carry them to a Sweet 16, I think conventional wisdom would have told you Nick Smith or Anthony Black would be Arkansas's go-to guys. Obviously, they're top projected NBA draft picks, and Devo Davis. I think we mentioned earlier in the season that the team kind of goes as Devo Davis goes. Typically, when he doesn't play well, the team doesn't play well. When he plays well, they tend to win more often than not. And I thought against Kansas is when you really saw him kind of realize that how much he meant to the team. And I thought you saw it in the second half when he took on the scoring load, but then even more so when even after he fouled out in that game up on the sidelines, he wasn't sitting down. He was up there. He was essentially an extra coach on the bench. And you mentioned the passion that he played with, and it was pretty evident in that moment and in the post-game interview, like Bob said. And then I also think that we should give Ricky Council his flowers because he's played every minute of the game against Kansas, played 39 of 40 against Illinois, and he has only recorded one foul in those minutes. And then I thought the free throw shooting was pivotal to both wins. He went 10 of 11 from the free throw line against Kansas, 11 of 12 at the free throw line against Illinois. And I don't think you get those wins without those free throws. And free throw shooting had been an Achilles heel of this team for much of the season. And I thought that was just another thing that caught my eye.
I love going to the NCAA tournament. And one of the reasons is, I end up both times that the last 2 years that I've gone, actually I've gone to the tournament 3 times. So I went when Arkansas lost to Butler in Detroit in the first round. Then I went last year and again this year, and to sit like 6 feet from the court. And I think one of the more interesting things for me having those seats is you get to see things that you don't normally see, hear things that you don't normally hear, kind of when you're tucked up into a corner in Bud Walton. And I keep going back to, like, to go back to the Illinois game when Devo, I think he hits a corner three literally right in front of me. He hits that three. It's a big shot. And you can literally hear him talking, hear him saying every word that he was saying, you could hear it. And he comes back down not too long after. Jordan Walsh misses a layup. Devo tips it back in. And he may have been as animated as I have ever seen him, like clapping, talking to the guy, talking to Terrence Shannon as he's bringing the ball up the floor. It kind of gave me chills because it's like stuff that you see it on TV, but you don't necessarily know what he's saying. Like I know everything he said. It wasn't vulgar, but it was maybe as animated and he was as emotional as I've seen him. And then Saturday happened and it just kind of all came pouring out. And I thought a really cool deal after the game on Saturday, he comes back. Obviously, that was a podium game if there ever was a podium game. So we have to wait on him to come into the locker rooms. Locker rooms are open after the game. But Ricky and Devo came in, and Devo was just he was just on cloud nine, man. For a minute, I got him for about 2 minutes by himself while I think everybody else talked to Ricky as soon as he walked in. And Devo was just he was he was just on cloud nine. Like I talked to him, I'm like, what are the emotions? And he's very calm, but he says, this is kind of unbelievable. And he was just talking about how happy he was for the young guys on the team to get to experience this. Like he's so happy that he's getting to do this for a third time, but with, a young group of guys, and he's leading them. And then I'm talking to Devo, and then Nick Smith walks by. They stand up, bear hug. Nick was really, really emotional after the game, and I think he kind of felt very, very appreciative for kind of how the older guys and some of the other young guys stepped up. But it was really interesting after the game talking to Anthony Black. He just said, there was a decision made that the younger guys, for the most part, were going to kind of take a back seat to the vets. And Devo stepped up. Kamani ended up with, maybe the biggest offensive rebound and putback that he's ever had. And that's including the San Diego State game in Maui, and finished, I think it was maybe four or 6 points, 10 boards. The vets were big time. What impressed y'all most maybe about just those guys? I mean, I guess you can even throw Ricky into that equation too.
I guess we've obviously talked a lot about Devo. One thing that really impressed me about Kamani, he starts the SEC tournament opener against Auburn, doesn't play a ton of minutes, plays okay. Next game's 23rd birthday. And I'm not saying, you need to play guys on their 23rd birthday like the Twins, but, for whatever reason, Kamani didn't play at all against A&M. Then they go to the NCAA tournament. Eric decides to start him against Illinois, and he said he wanted to, start somebody who had some experience. And Kamani plays 12 minutes, 5 rebounds, 5 points, 4. He, as Eric pointed out, he had more offensive rebounds 4 than Illinois the entire freaking game, 3. And so he's very pivotal in a short time span. And then he starts against Kansas. I think he played 19 minutes and he had 10 rebounds. He had that big stick back, like Scotty mentioned. Just so impactful. And I guess I'm just impressed with the way, and it was good to see him so happy in the locker room. But I'm impressed. I mean, some guys, they don't play in SEC, and they start, and the next game they don't even play. You're not getting a lot out of those guys. They're going into a shell, or they're upset, or whatever. I'm talking about guys on any team anywhere. And Kamani, you watch him on the bench, he's always animated, he's always supportive. I'm sure he likes to play as much as anybody. But if he doesn't have a role or a big role that game, he seems to accept that. But I was really impressed that a guy could play as well as he did in such big games when he didn't play that last SEC tournament game. He didn't let that affect him at all, as far as I could tell.
The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is sponsored by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Yeah, I remember, I think it may have been, Bob, you might remember this better than me, because I think Arkansas's bench was on the side of the floor that you were on. But it was at the Illinois game, maybe. Kamani was on the bench, and Arkansas, I think, draws a foul, gets to the free throw line. They're obviously, the coaching staff is communicating to players that aren't shooting free throws what the defensive plan is coming back down. And Kamani is out as far like into the coaching box as Eric normally is. And Eric's just kind of letting him do his thing because Kamani's communicating probably the same thing that Eric and some of the other guys were communicating. I just thought his leadership was fantastic. And Saturday is a little bit of insight on some pregame stuff on Saturday. So Arkansas and Kansas both come out for is about an hour before tip off, and Arkansas is going through stretch. Kansas eventually comes out through stretch, and I guess it's like Kansas's equivalent of Dave Richardson. So he's kind of walking them through stretch and all that. And I can hear everything that this dude's saying. And he's, he obviously gets a look at Arkansas, on the other end of the floor, and he's telling the Kansas strength coach maybe is telling Kansas players that, he sees on the other end, it seems like, Kansas should be able to beat up on Arkansas a little bit. A few minutes later, Kamani says something to Jalen Wilson. They start going back and forth a little bit, and it kind of did for a little bit look like Kansas was going to beat Arkansas up. I mean, they got up. I think Kansas fell down 2-0, and then they went up 11-2, and you're just kind of like, oh boy. Like Jalen Wilson gets an and one, and Kevin McCullough comes and stands over in front of the Arkansas fan section. He goes, uh-oh, and you're thinking maybe this one seed's about to put its foot down. But, and Arkansas kept fighting. I think they got within 3 or 4 in the first half, but Kansas just kept throwing punches and landing them. But Arkansas did the same thing in the second half. And I just think the toughness that Arkansas played with was phenomenal. I think the Kansas game in particular, masterful from Eric, right? Especially in the second half. They get down by 12, and he finds a way to floor a lineup that could defend and get stops, fight on the glass, and then have enough offense to overcome a deficit against a number 1 seed while you're dealing with major foul issues. How did y'all think that Arkansas did that? I mean, that was masterful, I thought, lineup configuration, just against pretty good adversity with, like, I think Arkansas ended up with 3 guys that fouled out, a lot of guys in foul trouble. I think Eric had to trust guys with 4 fouls. And I just thought it was masterful. What were y'all's thoughts on maybe that second half comeback?
Yeah, well, why don't you start, Andrew?
Yeah, I just think the defensive intensity that Arkansas plays with under Eric Musselman has been a trademark for his teams throughout his tenure. And I think that it could have been easy for this team specifically to kind of lighten up defensively after the early foul trouble that they got into in the early part of the season, where it just seemed like they were giving away so many free throws attempted to the other team. And Eric Musselman was even asked about what he can do to kind of help his guys defend without fouling earlier in the season. And he said, we're not going to change our defensive philosophy. We do the same drills we've always done, and we're going to stick with it. And I think you saw why, because you need every ounce of that defensive intensity that they played with against Kansas to get that win. And I won't think Jordan Walsh specifically deserves some praise for the job he did on Jalen Wilson. I thought he was masterful, and he finally used his length to his advantage and not to his disadvantage. And I thought he defended without fouling and controlled his enormous wingspan incredibly well.
There was a point in the second half, Bob, when Jordan was matched up with Jalen Wilson, and you're like, freshman against All-American, senior, or a vet against a freshman, he might have an advantage. And look, Jalen Wilson, you look at him live and in person, he's every bit 6'6", 225, 230. Like, he's got not to sound weird, but he's got the lower body of like a running back. Like, he's so well put together, but Jordan just clamped him at a really pivotal time, made Jalen Wilson shoot like a mid-range jumper over the top of the backboard. And then Jordan had that big tip out late in the game that they got Arkansas an extra pair of free throws. I thought Jordan was just fantastic, Bob.
Yeah, Jordan, I think they were plus 12 against Kansas when he was on the floor, and they were plus 22 against Illinois when he was on the floor. And so, and he had, I think he scored in combined 2 games, 16 points, and that's nice. That's 8 a game. But just the way he impacts things that don't necessarily show up in the box score, the help defense or the, on the ball defense. That play where Ricky misses the free throw and it looks like Arkansas is going to be up one with Kansas taking the ball down. Instead, Jordan gets in there and knocks it to Ricky, and Ricky, well, I thought it was a good play, decides to take it to the hole because they were going to foul him anyway. Maybe he can get an and one, but he didn't. But he hit the 2 free throws, so it ends up being a 3-point possession or a very unconventional 3-point play, however you want to look at it. And there's not a category for tips ball to teammate for crucial free throws. That's not on the box score, but that was a huge play. Big play I thought in the Illinois game. He got Jordan got a steal and he's streaking down, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody contested the shot and he missed it. It wasn't like he blew a bunny. It was a contested drive it. Devo's right there to tip it in. A great play by Devo and great hustle. But if Jordan doesn't get the ball and take it down and get it shot on goal, Devo can't tip it in. Again, I thought it was a huge play. Again, does not show from the box score, but Jordan just has so many of those. Had so many of those in Des Moines that, especially his defense. He's elite defensively, and he fouled out, but he did play 33 minutes. But he's really coming on. And it may not, he scored 10 points and that's great and all that, but it's really, I think, his defense and just all the things he does that maybe don't show me, diving for a loose ball and getting it to a teammate, or like you say, making a guy like Wilson a senior, not just an All-American, but a senior. He's like 3 or 4 years older than Jordan. And those don't show up in the box score. Make All-American, throw ball over the basket. That doesn't show up in the box score either.
Exactly.
Maybe they need to get a whole new set of categories to show what Jordan's doing. But I thought he was sort of there at the X. Maybe one of y'all said that, or maybe that popped in my head. He was sort of the X factor. Because you look at all the stars Arkansas has, and Jordan's obviously McDonald's All-American. You see him on some draft boards. He's obviously, I think it's safe to say, he's going to be in the NBA at some point. And yet you think about Anthony Black and Nick Smith and Devo and everybody else, Ricky, and but Jordan was the one that really plus 34 in 2 games, and they won those 2 games by 11 points. So that's, I'm trying to think when I've seen a stat like that in NCAA tournament play, pretty amazing. So, and really, I think their defense is what got them back in it. They're down 12 with 15 minutes left. You're thinking, well, this is Kansas. They're not playing, Kentucky Wesleyan. This is Kansas. They're number 1 seed. They're defending champs. And so Arkansas flipped the script. Instead of Arkansas being up by 12 and the team come back on them, they did it. And of all people, they did it against Kansas, so super impressive.
Yeah, I think it was maybe the first interview day or the first practice day that we had. I didn't end up writing about this, and I should have maybe given it to you as a note, Bob. But I asked AB and Kamani, I just kind of crouched down in between them. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to get you guys to maybe single out a guy in particular, but who is an X factor on this team that if this guy plays well, you got a shot to do some damage. And AB's kind of looking around the room and he just locks on to Jordan Walsh. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about AB. Like, he just kind of understands that if Jordan plays well, that, Arkansas tends to play well. And I thought the right wing 3 that he hit in the second half against Kansas, I think that's when I started to really think that Arkansas was going to advance, because that's a big time pressure shot. Even though it's wide open, there wasn't a soul around him. And Jordan struggled with consistency from 3, and it's not even that. It's sometimes he's been hesitant to pull the trigger on some of those 3s, but he just he caught it, didn't even think about it, shot it, and it was cash. And Jordan was phenomenal. Like Bob said, his plus minus was just otherworldly. And I think Jordan was maybe, I don't want to say he was an unsung hero, but I mean, Devo, Kamani, Ricky Council getting a ton of love, understandably and rightfully so, from the first weekend. But I don't think Arkansas gets out of the first weekend without Jordan Walsh either. It seems like he's found kind of a niche and a role coming off the bench, and he's obviously a guy at this point in the season that Eric trusts because he's so multifaceted. So let's did either of you watch UConn St. Mary's on Sunday? Do you guys have any first impressions on UConn?
I watched the last few minutes. I didn't get home till kind of late. Wasn't in a real I was pretty tired. I'll put it that way. But
Right.
yeah, I think UConn's a big physical team. They won that. I guess what they call the Film Night Classic out in Portland early. They kind of got on everybody's radar early. They were even getting some #1 votes in the AP poll for a while. So they came back down to earth a little bit. I think they had a stretch where they went 2-8 or 2-7 or something, but they weathered that. And of course they've got Dan Hurley, of the Hurleys, but Bobby Hurley's. I think he's Bobby Hurley's younger brother. I think he played at Seton Hall. Bobby, of course, played at Duke, played against the Hogs, but he's in, I think, his 5th year at UConn now, and he's gotten the program reestablished. I think it's their first Sweet 16 since 2014 when they won it all. And so
Yeah,
I mean,
that was with
UConn,
Kevin Ollie, wasn't it?
Kevin Ollie, right? And of course, they won three games with Jim Cal, 3 national championships. Won a few more than 3 games with Jim Cal. Won 3 national championships, and I'm sure everybody remembers the electric Arkansas UConn NIT consolation game in 1997. I was there with about maybe 200 other people in Madison Square Garden. I think they played it at 4 o'clock on a weekday, and they don't have consolation games anymore, which I think is a good idea. I think that may be the only time it's played UConn. UConn won the game, but this is how crazy things were back then. Just kind of a funny little story. I found out where UConn was staying. They're staying wherever they were staying. I called the hotel. I asked for Jim Calhoun's room. He answers. We talked for like 20 minutes. This is the day before the game to get advanced stuff. That wouldn't happen now in a million years. You'd have to go through 18 layers
Never would happen
of
now.
people. But that was 1997 for you folks. NIT consolation games, me talking to Jim Calhoun, calling up his hotel room, and he couldn't have been nicer. And so, but yeah, I think I really couldn't give you specifics on UConn without looking up some stuff, but they just struck me as a physical team and a pretty mature team, and they came from a good league, the Big East, just like Arkansas. I think sharpen their stuff in the SEC. So I think I think the early line I saw was I'm kind of getting into Scotty's betting line area here, but I think UConn's a 3.5-point favorite. And so I think to me, it's probably a pick 'em game.
Yeah, I think, if you're looking for some more info on UConn, I wrote a 5 things to know about them. That's on our website right now. And they've got a 6'9", 245-pound forward, Adama Sanogo. I think he was an honorable mention for the All-American teams by the Associated Press. I think he was All Big East performer. And I found out yesterday that he's one of 5 finalists for the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award. So this kid's playing really, really good ball. He averaged 26 on 72.7% shooting and 10.5 boards against Iona and St. Mary's last week. So he kind of had his way around the rim. And I think on the perimeter, the guy that Arkansas is really going to have to tend to is Jordan Hawkins. I mean, 6'5", can really, really shoot it. He's actually a finalist for the Jerry West Award for shooting guard of the year. So they've kind of got, go-to guys on front line in the backcourt, and, UConn shoots the ball really, really well from deep. I know that was kind of a difference maker against St. Mary's, and Jordan Hawkins, I think he hit 4 threes in like a 5-minute span in the second half against St. Mary's that kind of helped him get some separation. So on KenPom, I think UConn is, second or third nationally in efficiency, and defensively, they're third defensively or third offensively in terms of efficiency in the country, and they're number 14 in defensive efficiency. And it's going to be kind of a grown man's game again. Probably, I think these teams match up really well because there's big guards on both sides. And I would imagine Arkansas maybe goes a little bit bigger to maybe match up better with UConn. But Arkansas's 15th in defensive efficiency. So you got 2 top 15 teams on the defensive side of the ball. So, and it's 2 teams that do not allow many 3-point attempts. So I think Arkansas maybe more so than UConn's really got to hone in on that. But Bob and I are going to be headed to Las Vegas the next couple of days. We're going to have full coverage from Las Vegas. Got my hotel room all booked up at New York, and I've never stayed at that hotel, so I'm pretty excited. We're gonna blow out the coverage this week in Las Vegas, and the second game on Thursday is Gonzaga and UCLA. So going to be some really, really high level basketball, and there's, potential for a Gonzaga Arkansas rematch for a spot in the Final Four. Don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but it's kind of easy to go there mentally, For Andrew Joseph and Bob Holt, I'm Scotty Borderline. We appreciate you listening in today. We're probably going to do another podcast in between games if Arkansas does end up advancing to their third straight Elite Eight. But I think tip-off is at 6:15 Central on CBS, and just follow us throughout the week. We're going to have tons of coverage from interview days and pre and post game coverage. So follow along with us at Whole Hog Sports and with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. For Andrew Joseph and Bob Holt, I'm Scotty Borderline. We will holler at you guys again soon.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.